Hey backpackers, and welcome back to Off Grid. My name is Dave, and this channel is all about backpacking, hiking, and gear. If you're into that sort of thing, think about subscribing down below if you haven't already. It really helps out the channel, and I would greatly appreciate it. Today's video is all about 5 tips for purchasing your backpacking gear. There's a lot of different consideration and different things that you have to think about when you're thinking about purchasing your gear. And today I'm going to be covering the basics so that you have a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more insight, and different things to think about for when you actually pull the trigger and purchase those gear items. So let's get into it. All right, tip number 1 is going to be do an insane amount of research. Now, you have probably already seen a bunch of different YouTube videos, otherwise you wouldn't be here today, but definitely head on over, look at a bunch of different YouTube videos, shop around for the best prices that you possibly can, get on REI, get on Backcountry, and any of the other sites that you like out there. Look it up. See what it's like over time. Look at the different trends. Look at the different price points that kind of go up and down. They have different apps that you can track and plug in different website addresses for that can tell you when a price is the highest and when it's the lowest. A lot of different great tools that are out there where you can kind of like get a ballpark, get a range of the different prices so you know what's a good price for purchasing your new gear. And that's obviously assuming that you want to purchase the gear brand new. There's also a bunch of different websites which I'll link down below to, some great assets for purchasing used gear, either through like a garage sale style setup or through eBay or any of these other channels. There's great resources for that kind of stuff as well. So definitely research when the sales normally happen on these sites. Like I said, look for the garage sales. You can find insane deals on those types of things. Look for in-person garage sales too. There are some sites that might be close to your home that you can travel to and see if you can snag some great deals and certain things like that. Obviously there's limitations on that, especially when you're talking about clothing. And they might not have your size and whatever clothing item that you're looking for, but definitely do an insane amount of research. That's definitely tip number 1. Tip number 2 is going to be, what purpose does that piece of gear serve? You got to ask yourself that question. And what I mean by that is it really needed for your backpacking trips, or does it better suit a car camping style of camping? So you really need to figure out the type of gear that you're interested in and what type of purpose it's going to serve. Because something that could be great for backpacking might not be necessarily the greatest option for car camping. A good example of that would be a water filter. You don't always need to filter your water when you're going car camping, because a lot of times you're going to end up bringing some filtered water already there with you, so you don't need to filter water on a car camping trip. And then vice versa too. So there's a ton of stuff that you can bring car camping that doesn't really make sense for your backpacking adventures, and mostly that's going to be heavier gear items that you wouldn't consider bringing into the backcountry for backpacking. And that kind of leads me to my number 3 tip, and that is going to be, try to think of different types of gear that can be multifunctional, multifaceted, things that are going to be higher in versatility. What do I mean by that? So a couple of different examples that I can give you here. One is going to be your sit pad. A sit pad can be a great doormat. It can be for your bum when you need to take a rest on the trail and you don't want to bust out your chair, or even if maybe you don't want to bring a chair. It just gives you that barrier of something to sit on. It can also be used as a mat on the ground for other things. I like to place my food bag on it and other things that can't fit in other spaces. If you go with the 1/8 inch Gossamer Gear mat that is super popular nowadays, you can also use that to stretch out on, or use it on the trail for a nap, a quick nap. Something like that, anything that like can be a little bit more versatile. Another highly versatile piece of gear that I'm actually thinking about cutting out of my gear list would be the buff, the infamous buff. Now this piece of gear is super versatile. You can wear it as a headband, you can keep your face warm with it, you can put it around your wrist, you can dunk it in the river to cool yourself off, you can use it as a pot holder. There's many different things that you can use that piece of cloth for. Another piece of gear that's a little bit versatile is going to be a poncho. A lot of people don't end up bringing a poncho, but a poncho can not only keep you dry when you're walking on the trail and hiking on the trail, but you can also use it as a ground sheet for underneath your tent. I've seen that on Z-Packs and in a couple of different uses where a tarp can double up as a ground sheet. And the last one that I have for you real quick is going to be a quilt. If you sleep with a sleeping quilt over a sleeping bag, a lot of them have an open design to them so that they can be cinched closed at night for closing off your foot box, but you can also open them up and use it as a blanket for when you're just sitting around camp if it's a little bit colder and you need a little bit extra warmth at camp. The number 4 tip for purchasing your backpacking gear is going to be a budget. And a simple question of, do you have a budget? Do you not have a budget? Most of us have a budget. If you don't have a budget, you're probably not watching this video, but most of us do have a budget. We have a dollar and a price point in mind that we're thinking of before we're thinking about purchasing that piece of gear. And it really depends on different factors as far as like what you're thinking about for a price, right? So it's not only your income and what you make, but also the mentality behind, is this really worth it? Or am I going to be thinking about it way too much and babying that type of material and that piece of gear too much when I'm out in the backcountry if I spend X number of dollars on that piece of gear? You might not think of things that way, but I definitely do. There's a couple of pieces of gear in my kit that I baby a lot more, that I think about a lot more, that I kind of freak out a lot more if something happens, gets caught, snagged, or whatever on a piece of down material or something like that. Then my heart drops a little bit, right? So you definitely have to think of what your budget is, what it kind of fits in, and what makes sense for when you're thinking about purchasing gear. And the last tip here is going to be tip number 5, and it's going to be your overall weight. So this is a pretty simple one too, but I'm going to throw in a little bit of a curveball here and give you guys a question as to at what point does gear kind of become a little bit too light and you sacrifice comfortability for that lightweight factor. So everybody wants the lightest piece of gear. Everybody wants to have the lightest pack possible when they're going out on their hikes. But there's definitely a threshold where when you go too light with your pack, you're definitely going to sacrifice a lot of comfortability. So, a simple equation that I always like to think of is when the weight goes down, the comfortability tends to go down as well. And speaking to the previous point of the budget and the price points, a good equation for that bullet point would be as the price point tends to go up, the weight in your pack tends to go down. So there's a lot of different things that I like to keep in mind there. So definitely with weight, a general rule of thumb, and not always, it can't be applied to every single type of gear that you're thinking about. There's definitely budget gear items that are lower in weight and you don't have to sacrifice weight as much, or it's very close to those more expensive pieces of gear. But usually a good rule of thumb is as the weight goes down, so does your comfortability. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you're a through hiker, you want to pack the least amount of weight possible. Your base weight's going to be super low, and it also means that you're going to be throwing out those luxury items that you might use for other types of trips. So things like a camping chair or stuff like that. And I'm actually going to throw in a bonus item here. This is going to be tip number 6, and that is going to be basically posing you guys a question, and this could help you retroactively with all the other bullet points that I had just mentioned. And the question that I'm going to pose is going to be, what type of backpacker or / camper do you want to be? And answering that question, really figuring out which type of camper you want to be, will ultimately give you greater insight into all the other bullet points that I mentioned today. So let me give you a few different examples. Most campers and backpackers kind of fall into these 3 different types of categories. The first one is going to be a through hiker. It's going to be the people who spend the most amount of time on trail. They're going to destroy the most amount of miles, seeing the most amount of things. And a lot of us can't do that. I don't really know how they can swing that with their jobs and whatnot and take that type of time off, but whatever. That's going to be one type of camper, and that's going to be the thru hiker. The second one is going to be the more along the lines of the weekend warrior. That's what I kind of, categorize myself as, which is somebody who kind of goes out, looks towards the weekends for their trips, goes out anywhere from like Thursday to Friday, comes back Saturday. You're definitely not doing as many miles. You are definitely thinking more so about comfort and less about the miles. But in that particular instance, these types of people are going to end up bringing more comfort items than the thru hikers. The thru hikers in general are going to bring little to no comfort items, and that's basically just stereotyping. Anybody can bring different comfort items and things like that, so don't think of it from that perspective of like, if you're a thru hiker, you definitely have to cut out all comfort items. That's not necessarily the case, but in general, these rules of thumb kind of take effect and are usually true. So the weekend warriors are going to carry a little bit more comfort items when you're out on the trail. You're doing a little bit less miles, and your pack weight and your base weight, your overall weights are going to be definitely higher than the thru hikers. And then the last category is going to be kind of like your occasional camper and or somebody who ends up doing a little bit more car camping rather than backpacking. Maybe you go on a couple of backpacking trips a year, but you're definitely more of a car camping style. You like that a little bit better. And those people are probably not going to think about weight nearly as much. Comfort is going to be king because they have this big car that they can throw a bunch of stuff into and bring to camp. So it really depends on which category you kind of fit yourself into, and what style of camping that you want to do. So I would definitely say try to narrow that down into what style of camping you want to do first, and then go back through this list here, and that'll give you a much clearer picture as to what kind of gear you're going to be looking to purchasing for your trips. The shout out this week is going to go over to Bryce Newbold and his channel. I was thinking about him when I was thinking about doing this video because he likes to use a term called crazy stupid light, and a couple of my bullet points kind of touch on that a little bit, particularly with the weight factor. I was thinking, as the comfort goes down and the weight goes down, I was thinking crazy stupid light in his channel. He's got a hilarious channel. He's got some great trips, some great tip videos, some great gear videos. I think he's based out of the Ohio area, so definitely head on over and check his channel out. So that's going to do it for this really quick 5-tip video. Obviously, I definitely missed some things in there. Let me know what you guys think of when you think of purchasing your gear. I want to hear all about it down below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know what I messed up on, what I'm completely wrong on. I want to hear from you guys, and I love hearing the feedback on all of these videos. That's going to do it for me for this week, guys. If you want to check out another tip video, the first ever video that I did was 5 beginner backpacking tips. I'll post it right over here. And remember, if you're headed off grid, make sure you do your research and you make it a safe one. I'll see you guys later.